Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of a football update. This is Andy.
And this is Robin.
We're just going to do a quick episode today. We're just going to go over, go over what happened in the first round and our thoughts on some of the team's additions to the draft overall. So, Robin, this was not only was this the biggest offensive draft of all time, it was a big run on quarterbacks ever seen before. 6 taken in the first 12 picks, and one of them is just one of the weirdest draft picks of all time.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever heard of a team giving a quarterback $100 million guaranteed contract, 4-year contract, and within a month and a half drafting quarterback top 10, and maybe, according to the agent Mike McCartney and I think Dan Rossini from The Athletic, the Kirk Cousins camp was definitely shocked and stunned by that move to draft Michael Penix at number 8 for the Falcons. And it feels like they didn't pick a lane for whatever reason. There's the load up on a veteran quarterback, and that's what it looked like they were doing with all the offensive weapons that they had, and then added like Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore. Or, draft a rookie quarterback and you can load up the entire team. And, that's what they would have done if they just drafted Penix and maybe brought in a bridge. But, Kirk Cousins left the Vikings because he was set to be the bridge, it was looking like. And he was probably, I think at least in his press conferences, he was like, well, it looked like Atlanta was willing to commit to him through the end of his career. And now they've kind of, and again, they've said, oh, well, if he plays well for 4 or 5 years, the GM Terry Fontenot, it's like a great problem to have. And it's like, well, then you're just sitting a guy who's 24 until he's 27, 28, 29 years old.
Yeah, it's just, this better work, because he might lose his job at some point, because it did look like Arthur Blank's like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah. It's tough to know what's in that draft room, but it did have a weird exchange to it.
Like the Bills thing, what we're going to get to later in the episode, but like I even made someone agree at work, like it is I personally, let me just say this quick sidebar, like I actually didn't have a problem with them trading to the Chiefs. We'll talk about that in depth later, but like you said, like I've never. No, I take that back. The only worst, not worst, because the jury's still out. But like the most strangest thing that turned out to be, in my opinion, the worst draft trade of all time is when Mike Ditka, the Saints head coach, mortgaged his entire draft.
Yeah.
What was it, Robin? Like 99, 2000, I think.
I believe it was the 90. Was it the 90? I believe it was the 99 draft. Yeah, it was the year after Payton, I think. Yeah, and it was the whole draft, and then a first and third next year, I think.
Yeah, and then also, if I remember, because that was the same draft that Donovan McNabb got drafted, because if I remember, Philly was pretty pissed that they didn't take the running back. I mean, and again, I think that they won that, because, again, I'm not saying he's one of the best of all time, but in his prime, Donovan was a very quarterback.
Definitely, yeah.
2000s kids know what I'm talking about. But so again, it's like you said, it's just you feel for the kid, because let's say the best happened with Cousins, like you said, it's gonna be at least four years till he starts, and if worse 2. But it's like you could have drafted a defensive end, which you really needed, or at worst, which is like there's 2 things you could have done. You have a pretty good offense. You could have gotten Roma Dunze.
Yeah.
And who was the other? I was going to say. Or they could have traded out.
Yeah.
Or they could have gotten like 2 first round picks and some other stuff to build a bigger arsenal. So looking through it, we knew Chicago, Caleb Williams. I think out of all these quarterbacks, he has the best situation, because he's the supposed genetic freak, and you have 2 phenomenal receivers already in the NFL, and then you got Roma Dunze coming in.
Yeah, and TJ Houshmandzadeh has been on a couple pods this week. I think it was on the Herd, and I think also a Chicago-based one. And he said He trains with Roma Dunze, and he basically said he couldn't find a comparison for him. And this is you could say overly high praise, but TJ Smith-Mazza's been training with a bunch of receivers for a bunch of years and was a great one in his own right. And he says, there's no really comp, but if there was, it would be like Larry Fitzgerald, but faster. And, he was the best contested catch guy out of all the draftable receivers, and this is about as good a receiver draft as we've seen in years. So you add him to the mix, and him and Caleb Williams worked out the week before the draft, along with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, and then they're on the same flight, to Vegas for the draft, and they leave on the same flight to Chicago. So it just was meant to be, and even Ryan Poles was saying that they were thinking of trading up, even though it was another receiver, just because he was a top 5 player in the draft on their board. So to add that to the mix, they have a couple tight ends that commend Joe Everett, DeAndre Swift at back. They're putting all the pieces in place, and I know before this week you're kind of like, is it, should they trade the picks? But you look at it and it's like, you've built like that great receiving core that you could have had if you had taken, a Marvin and tried to do that. And I think, now you've basically put a top end rookie quarterback talent with about as great a situation as anyone has ever had. And I feel like you'll need that to do anything in the NFC North with a Packer team that's on the come up and had the most draft picks of any team, I believe. And then the Lions, who, past 2 or 3 years have really drafted well and may have fixed their, secondary issue. So, but yeah, the Chicago, even though they had, I think, the fewest amount of picks, or 4 or 5 picks, they come out looking like the most optimistic and happy about their situation just because of how much value they got from those picks and overall from the trade from Carolina.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, on the flip side in the NFC North, even though we're going a little out of order, but since they are in the same division, the Vikings got their potential future quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, and I'm really excited for the NFC North. It's going to feel like the AFC North, kind of, because all the Vikings, despite them having 2 draft picks, all they had to do was just move up 1 to get their guy, and at best, he could have a phenomenal. He has 2 really great receivers, Jefferson and Addison. You got their tight end, which is brilliant.
Hawkinson, if he gets healthy, yeah.
And then also the other receiver, like 1 or 2 of the other receivers are like, they're not like world breakers, but they're pretty good. Yeah.
And Kevin O'Connell is the offensive coach, and Brian Flores, one of the more creative defensive coaches in the league. And they added Grenard in free agency, and then got Dallas Turner with the other first rounder, and I think Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman at linebacker. They had Ivan Pace as an undrafted guy who was insane blitzer. I mean, it'll be the offensive version of the AFC North, where all 4 teams are so great on that side of the ball. That's just going to be hellacious fun, and like you said, compete for the best division along with. I think it'll be AFC North, and then competition for number 2 will be the South in the AFC, and then the NFC North. As of now, that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, and then moving on to the last 2 there's 3 QBs. I apologize. Just quickly, despite the tension potentially from Washington and Jaden Daniels' camp, it seems like they mended the defenses.
Yeah.
So he's a commander. I think they have a very bright future. And then Drake May, I think he's a pretty decent quarterback. I will say this. I don't know if it was the coach or GM or maybe just a radio talk show host, someone saying they got, not offered ridiculous things. It's like, I saw somewhere that the Vikings were offering their 2 that they have this year and their first next year. It's like, again, I get if you want the guy, you want the guy, but that's a haul, like a ransom.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just quick. It's just like, what do you mean it's ridiculous? Like that's a phenomenal deal, dude.
Yeah, but I do think the only problem is future picks are future picks, and I think if they had accepted a trade like that, they wouldn't get their guy at quarterback, and then you're punting on the position potentially till next year, and next year. Who do we have? There's a Carson Beck out of Georgia, who may or may not be great. And then, you have the Shadur Sanders situation in Colorado, which, that could take on a life of its own. It's already kind of taken it over the off season. It felt like a lot of people have mentioned, it's like everything that people said about, or could have been said about Caleb about not being a bad teammate, like that was squashed in the off season. You have Shadur Sanders, meanwhile, who is kind of, punched down on people that have transferred out of the program from Colorado, which not a great look. So I think for the Patriots, you do need a big-time talent at quarterback to win the AFC, unless you're just so loaded across the board, and even then it's not really enough. So, I think Drake May's very talented, and they got a couple young receivers in the draft, Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. Maybe they find another vet throughout the rest of the offseason. But, defensively, they're always going to be studs there, and they were pretty great on defense last year with even Gonzalez hurt early in the year at corner and Judon hurt as well. Jaden Daniels, I think Washington's built up the roster a decent amount. They didn't address tackle, which is definitely a massive concern because when he got pressured, very often he did accept sacks. He did escape a few times, but he's the type of guy that can, did throw his body around in the SEC, but if you try that in the NFL, you could be out in a couple games. So, and then the other rookies were McCarthy, as we mentioned, then Bo Nix in Denver, which I know people were down on that pick, but
that was a pretty decent pick, yeah. And he got his number one receiver as well in the third round. Like I was a little bummed that the Bills didn't.
Yeah, Troy Franklin, yeah.
I mean, we've seen Burrow and Chase.
Yeah.
And, isn't there like one or two more teams that have like a receiver that was teammates with their quarterback?
Yeah, I'm trying to place it. I don't know. I mean, the talk was with the Bears, it was kind of like Caleb and Adunze, even though they were different schools, where, you're getting a guy that he's friendly with and has familiarity with right off the bat. But, yeah, I'm trying to remember, and I just can't place it.
I remember. It wasn't a receiver, but it's ETN and Lawrence.
Oh, yep. That's a good one. That's a very good one, yeah.
So, a few of these quarterbacks, all projects, you got, and again, you have the Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams that the way they're hoping they can start right away. So,
yeah.
Then again, we'll see with McCarthy. I wouldn't be surprised if Darnold starts. Again, I think they're going to really compete at camp for most of it. The rest of the picks in the first round that I do, it's in the first top 10, 11 picks that I wanted to mention. They were all really smart moves. Arizona did the smart thing, like, okay, we have a decent line. We have a great quarterback. Why not get potentially the best receiver in the generation?
Yeah, Marvin.
He's in the NFC, so that's also nice.
Yeah. Marvin Harrison Jr., just get the guy that's, the best available player. I think they had talked about trading down and everything, but they ended up, I think, with 12, 13 picks anyway, and maybe there are a few reaches here and there, but I love the plan by Arizona to be a strong physical team, run downhill. They're as good as any team down the stretch running the ball, and, they add a rookie running back in Trey Benson, they add a blocking tight end in Tip Ryman, a couple linemen. I think they're just going to be trying to be a bully, and then when teams put 8, 9 men in the box, it's okay. Give us that one-on-one with Marvin, we'll take it,
Oh, yeah, they had a treasure trove of draft picks from last year. Actually, if not the Colts, I think it might have been the Cardinals with the most, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
And then I looked around, like, the most picks this round were offensive tackles or offensive line.
Yeah.
My God. When we get into it in a second, we got your guy, Joe Alt from Notre Dame. Went to the Chargers. Very smart move. You could have gotten Malik Neighbors to help Burrow, but, like, you need to protect Burrow first. And from what I hear, this guy's a generational tackle. You got Latham from Alabama. Some people are kind of roasting up, but it's like, you really need to protect
Yeah,
Will
Levis.
You want to give him a shot.
He is coming from right to left, so that's an interesting transition. And then Joe Alt was going from left to right, but Jim Harbaugh is going to coach him up in the Chargers. Alt, and then Bill Callahan's one of, if not the best O-line coaches in the league in Tennessee, with his son Brian being the head coach. So he's going to coach up J.C. Latham as well.
And I apologize if I'm not saying his name, but in fairness, it is quite a wordful. The Jets moved down one spot and they got a tackle, which that line might be one of the worst, if not the worst, last year. So they got, I'm going to be butchering this, I apologize. Lumue Fashanu?
I think it's Ulu. I think they just for short Ulu Fashanu from Penn State.
Fashanu. Okay, yeah, Fashanu.
Yeah. And, they had added Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, John Simpson on the O-line. So they're making sure that, what happened last year isn't going to happen this year.
Right. And then, the last other pick in the top 10, again, like I said, smart moves, Again, it would have been kind of smart if the Giants drafted Penix, McCarthy, or Nix, but at the same time, it's like, okay, you had, as we said, the top 3 receivers this year potentially might be the best receivers in the next 5 drafts. But again, potentially, you don't know. So that was very smart of them to get Malik Neighbors. Because that gives him a room. At worst, he'll have maybe an okay season. At best, you have the guy ready for next year, depending on what happens with Daniel Jones. We'll talk about that later, maybe in the next couple months. But that's going to be a very interesting situation. After the quarterbacks, going into the 10 through 20 round, the Raiders, they raided again. Again, don't get me wrong, Brock Bowers, rightfully so, is, the top tight end in the draft, and I don't mind him going in the first round, but it's just, at the same, most of the top quarterbacks were gone because trying to get Penix. So I'll say this: some people are really on it. Like Gardner Minshew's there. Like again, with Gardner Minshew and that team, like I've said this before, they are the ultimate wild card team. So especially now that they're in Vegas, so that could be a very solid pickup. I don't know if I think he'll get the job over Officer Farva. But I say that with love because he's a pretty cool dude, but he looks so much like the actor from Super Troopers.
Yeah. Favre plays like, or what looks like Farva plays like Favre, the T-shirt he wore last year.
Oh, and he has a sense of humor, which I really love.
Yeah. And I think, sorry. I think the Raiders were trying to go all in for Jane Daniels, and it would have taken a record number of picks to do it. And then, and then getting a decent tight end combo of Bowers and Mayer to go along with Adams and Myers at receiver. Although you do wonder if you aren't, making the most out of the last year or two of Devontae Adams' prime, which is a concern there. But I think they just didn't find a guy that was, after those first 6 worthy of investing in.
Oh, yeah. So staying in the top 10 to 20, we had, 3 more tackles going. We had the Saints getting Talisi Fuaga.
Yep.
If I said that wrong. Amarius Mims, smart move. And then the Steelers are padding their offensive line with Troy Fontenot. And for either Wilson or Fields, we'll see who gets that job. And then, like we mentioned, on the Falcons, in my opinion, they still messed up. They could have gotten, they really need it. They could have gotten the best edge in the draft.
Yeah.
But they fell to the Colts, and again, that GM is phenomenal. And quick sidebar: if you guys haven't seen it, you really should watch his press conference.
Oh yeah.
He goes, this is one of the few times I'm cool with it just because he's
Mm-hmm.
rightfully so. These players are just kids. They're you're still maturing, brains developing until about like 27, 28. So it just reminds me of that old coach from the 2000s. They're like, "Come at me, I'm a man."
Oh, Mike Gundy, yeah, Mike Gundy, way back in the day.
So the Colts lot 2 was a smash pickup. Like you said, the Falcons dropped the ball and then the Colts picked it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just going over some of those. So the Ballard, that presser was great. It was about a Donnie Mitchell who they drafted in the second round, actually traded down with the Panthers. Big time talent receiver, but there may have been some stuff on field. Like there was definitely stuff on tape about him not finishing plays or finishing routes for whatever reason. But yeah, there was the diabetic thing that, may or not be an issue. But once you get to the NFL, that you got like the best nutrition people and everything else. So yeah, it did feel like potentially character assassination. But again, these are multi-million-dollar decisions. But you do, whenever there's like anonymous scouts and everything saying this stuff, it's, no one's putting their name to it, and they can say almost anything and everything, which is a shame. But and then
if you, at the very least, if you're going to put that out, at least put your name on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the lot 2 pick, if he's the best pass rusher in the draft, it's a really good one. Did have the medical with necks, so I'm not sure if it was taken off teams' boards or just pushed down because of that. But, they were one of the best teams in sacks, even though they didn't have that elite big-name pass rusher. I mean, they do have DeForest Buckner, but your Steelers, they're your, second team, and the last 2 years, Omar Khan has kind of, taken the lead from formerly Kevin Colbert. They had moved on from the most recent draft picks. Kenny Pickett was the last first rounder from Kevin Colbert. The one before was Najee Harris, who didn't give the 5th-year option to, and they've really built up the O-line with Broderick Jones last year, Troy Fautanu, Mason McCormick, Zach Frazier. So they're building back up that bully on both ends of the line of scrimmage and just make it easier for whoever starts and plays quarterback. Bryant McFadden said this week from CBS Sports, formerly a corner for them, that they were looking at the receiver market and there's a potential big move. We haven't seen anything yet, but, maybe they can add to the room, get a nickel, and then all of a sudden, they're as good as any team that, well, not as good as Baltimore, but pretty much every other team in the AFC North they can play and compete with. And then Mims to Bengals, they'd brought in Trent Brown at right tackle, but he's kind of a stopgap. Mims, a lot of potential, very little starts, so we'll see what happens on that front. And then, I'm trying to remember, Byron Murphy to the Seahawks, that's going to be a really tough division, and Mike McDonald, I feel like he's going to make a stamp on the defensive side, try and, hopefully get back up to that Legion of Boom status on defense, because if they can combine that with a pretty good offense with Geno, they have a chance in that division, but it's just so brutal in the NFC West.
Oh, absolutely. And then another person, I was going to mention, the fascinating thing was after Bowers from pick 14 to, let's see, give me a second here. I almost had it. Till 22. It was either defensive players. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was line players on the defense till about 22, and then also offensive linemen. So there was a big run on the line for defense. Other than Byron Murphy, Dallas Turner went to Minnesota. Which again, good for them. They didn't have to move that pick, and they addressed. Again, Atlanta, that they addressed the need they sorely needed.
Yep. I think Atlanta did invest in later rounds, but the pass rushers and pass protectors, they're normally first round picks, the top end guys. So you have to hope that you hit on those guys, because if you didn't, you end up improving that defense as much as you really needed to. And it was not a good pass rush last year.
Yeah, and then the next two edges, Jared Verse for the Rams, Chop Robinson for Dolphins because again they had some injuries last year and concerns, so that was a smart move. And with the Rams, did they get a defensive lineman later in the draft as well?
Yes, actually in the second round they got.
That's why I got confused for a second. Yeah, it was the second round. So you got one defensive player to help the line at the end, and then you got and again. They were talking about the regular, like no one's going to replace Aaron Donald. But if you have those two players like play at their best in their level, like that, maybe that could equal Donald. Again, that's quite a compliment because that's two people compared to one.
Yeah, they've loaded up the last 2 years on that side, or at least in the front seven. Kobe Durant, Byron Young, and then the two Florida State guys this year, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. And there's a great video of them communicating after Braden Fisk was being picked. And it was, he was in tears because, like, they were both back on the same defense after spending the last year in college on that Seminole defense. So, yeah, the Rams keep building up and up and up. And, McVay and Les Snead, as good as anybody at building up a team.
Absolutely. Eagles, they drafted the first corner, Quinion Mitchell, and then him and Eugene were the top two corners, and then sure enough, later, I think it was the second round, the Eagles got Cooper Eugene.
Yep.
So that's a great turnaround for them.
Yeah, they really need that secondary backup. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. I remember when they drafted him this night. That night because I slammed my fist on the table. That was when the Jaguars took Brian Thomas Jr.
Oh yeah.
Because I at the time, I know he was interested in Buffalo a little bit.
Yeah.
Was he one of the top? Sure, if he was one of the top 30 visits.
Maybe at the combine, but I don't know if he visited.
I'm thinking of Troy Franklin.
Yep. Oh, Troy Franklin. Yep. And Xavier Worthy were top 30 visits. Yeah.
Yeah, so Brian Thomas Jr., a great pickup for the Jaguars. This is like when the second tier of the receivers are getting picked. It was around 20 to 30. Then the Lions went corner with Arnold, and then the next two picks were both offensive line. The Packers, Jordan Morgan, helping Jordan Love, and then maybe like a signing bonus for Baker Mayfield, getting a pretty good center. First center in the draft, Graham Barton. And then before we get to the last run of receivers, you had the defensive end, Darius Robinson, going to the Cardinals.
Yep.
As you said, a plethora of picks, including first-round picks. And then, so your thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, so Graham Barton, I think the most versatile lineman, was able to basically go 4 or 5 positions, and, that helps out a lot with the left tackle as good as Tristan Wirfs. Tyrion Arnold to the Lions. They trade up with the Cowboys from 29 to 24. He gave up a third for it, and, between him and Ennis Rakestraw and, bringing some guys in free agency, they really want to make sure corner and secondary is not an issue. And then last year they brought in Brian Branch as nickel/safety, so trying to cover up their biggest weakness, although I don't think they really got much in free agency or in the draft pass rush wise, but secondary they plan to be way better there. And then the Jaguars getting Brian Thomas Jr. to hopefully, he's going to be that 4-3 speedster, take the top off the defense. You got Gabe Davis on the other side, Christian Kirk in the slot. They had just let go of Zay Jones this week, so reformatting and changing up the offensive skill group to help out Trevor Lawrence, and then also adding into the offensive line with Mitch Morse having been brought in from Buffalo. So, yeah, those are last few picks. And then Darius Robinson, Arizona finally getting some talent on the defensive side with the defensive coach. So that'll be interesting to see all those guys both on the D-line that they've signed, and then Robinson, and then all the secondary picks they've had the past couple of years to go along with Budda Baker.
absolutely. Now we're gonna when we're talking next, we're gonna skip over pick 29 and 30, just because the next three are receivers, and they all kind of have the same story because two of them were because of the Bills, and some people, you might not believe me, I'm sure Robin does because we talked about it, but I was one of the few Bills fans when that pick happened. I was not that upset. I was smart. I was like, and you're mentioning Mitchell. This is the thing about the receivers. They're like, it's not just about the talent. It's if it's the right fit for the team and the quarterback. And let's say the Bills stayed up there. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys or one of those teams, other than the 49ers, made the deal with Kansas City to get there, because if we didn't get Worthy, he probably would have gone to the Chiefs. So why not get a third round pick in the slot picks? Which we got a great. Was the running back third, or was he fourth?
He was the fourth round. Ray Davis was the fourth rounder from Kentucky, and then Dwayne Carter from Duke, the defensive tackle, was the third rounder. Yep.
Right. I got those rounds mixed up. Right. But yeah, that guy's a bulldog. I love that pick. So you know what? I'm not mad at all that the Bills did that. And then also, I'm trying to remember what we got for Carolina, because we swapped the next two picks. In between each other, I should say. Do we get any picks, or do we just swap a lot of picks?
I think we swapped. I think they turned a fourth into a third with Kansas City, essentially, and then they got the Bills gave up a seventh, and then they got a sixth from Carolina to swap from 32 to 33.
That's right.
Yeah, and apparently the Patriots were thinking of coming up with Buffalo and asked for a trade up, but Buffalo was thinking, well, maybe they go up for Keon Coleman, which we either want Keon Coleman or Xavier Legette, or we're not moving down.
Right. And again, I'm sure they didn't tell the Bills, as we're Brandon Bill. Like, I had a feeling the Bills probably knew. It's like, okay, they're probably going for Worthy. Because that's the kind of guy they're looking for, that system. So the next receiver, which was not involved in the Bills trade, was Ricky Pearsall, which I think is a player that will fit that, especially that offense, and help Purdy, but also, like, I think kind of insurance in case Ayuk or I'm having a brain fart.
Debo,
that thing, Debo. So pretty interesting. And then we have Xavier Legette. Good move by the Panthers. They really, I got to give them some props. They really went out this draft. So before we get into Coleman, Robin, because I want to save him for last, what are your thoughts on these receivers?
So Xavier Worthy had the record 40 time at the combine, and that's the worry of all Bills fans, is that we gave up the next Tyreek Hill to Kansas City. Now their last few receiver picks, Sky Moore, he was the darling of the draft process, hasn't done much in 2 years. Everyone thought, they got to steal Kadarius Toney, and outside of that Super Bowl, he hasn't been a massive contributor. And then Rashee Rice looked like a great on-field presence for them, but he's going to be suspended most likely at least half the year. So as great as Andy Reid and Brett Veach are, there's some blind spots with the receiver picks, but Andy Reid did also Tyreek Hill and Deshaun Jackson. So if there's anyone who can take an elite speedster who may be slight or small and make him a big time weapon, it's Andy Reid, of course. But I think the Bills needed someone who can make the tough catch, can make the contested catch, and that's not Xavier Worthy's game, but he's not the, normal speedster like a John Ross who can just run fast. Like, he can run a decent amount of routes and do some things. So for Kansas City, I get the pick, and then you have him and Hollywood Brown, and, whatever help else happens with the rest of the receiver group. Ricky Pearsall, older guy, I think he's going to be 24 as a rookie at some point. Actually played with Brandon Ayuk 1 year at Arizona State before transferring to Florida. Incredible athletic profile. His one catch against Charlotte was probably one of the more highlights of the season, just like the one-handed grab, sticking his arm out while he was about to get hit was insane. And I think he's a great fit there. It does sound like John Lynch has basically said that there's no plan to trade either Ayuk and Debo, so I think it's going to be a 1 year, have those guys there, and then maybe move off Debo in the offseason, maybe find some way to pay Ayuk what he's looking for, and then you have the depth of Jawan Jennings, Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, a talented rookie they drafted in the 4th round as well. And then Xavier Legette, he's a fun personality as well too. Guy that was kind of a late bloomer in college. This was like his last year in college, and the first year actually got a chance to start and play big, other than the bowl game the year before, and he had some incredible plays and some incredible stats. Not the most fluid route runner, kind of in that DK Metcalf role, where if you can find a spot for him, to do just 5 or 6 basic routes, he can be fantastic. And they have other great route runners. They brought Deontay Johnson this offseason, had Adam Thielen in the last offseason. So, we'll see year one what he can do. Again, like you said, they're investing around Bryce Young a bit more this offseason. It's just that right now I don't see a lot of high-end players, but they definitely have done some work on the roster. Is it enough to make them not in the basement of the league, in the basement of the NFC South? We'll have to see on that, but, it's a decent first step.
And just quick thing, like having Thielen there, would be pretty good for a young kid, so that's good. So looking at the other 2 players in the first round, we had the Cowboys getting a tackle for Tyler Guyton. Again, I'll say this: that was someone to help Dak, so that's smart. Potentially Trey Lance, depending on what happens this year. Just oh my god, like they didn't go for a running back, which they sorely needed because they didn't count on Pollard signing with the Titans, and then you brought Zeke back. It's just like if they would have gotten a receiver and signed Zeke, maybe that would have been one thing. But just Jerry Jones. We're going all in this year. It's flabbergasted.
Yeah. I think it was Rich Eisen the week after the combine. The one thing that he had heard, and he put out all the rumors that he had heard, and one of them was the all-on comment was more of a saying, outside of CD and Micah Parsons, everyone's kind of just going to play out their contract, whether that's Mike McCarthy as coach, Mike Zimmer, I think, is only on 1-year deal, Dak, 1-year deal, and then, they have the void year, which costs them some money, but it doesn't feel like they're going to go out their way to extend anybody unless, they produce bigger in the postseason than they have. Running backs you can get late in the process. There's always like team that has 1 or 2 more running backs than they need and can keep. So maybe they can swing a trade for, just throwing some names out there like a Jeff Wilson, a Damian Pierce, a Khalil Herbert,
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, but yeah, they're going to be a very interesting team to watch. Coming up in the draft, and then the last cornerback of the round, Nate Wiggins to the Ravens. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he had a 4.2 40, I think, as well. Smaller corner, not as small as what Emmanuel Forbes was last year for Washington, and that was a rough rookie year for him. We'll see how he bounces back, but they had lost Ronald Darby in free agency, so getting him and then TJ Tampa later in the draft at that corner position, kind of much needed in order to get that defense hopefully to play at the same level, even with, Mike McDonald gone, so kind of a transition in the offseason. But, Baltimore, they draft and develop as good as anybody. And if they can get him up to speed to go along with Kyle Hamilton and Marlon Humphrey and the rest of that defense, they're going to be, competing for and maybe at the top of the AFC standings at the end of the year like they were last year.
Yeah, and then lastly, we're just going to mention the first pick of the second round just because the Bills swapped out and we are Bills fans. I really love the pick, and from what I heard afterwards, Josh specifically really put input that that's the guy he wanted. So that's a phenomenal stamp of approval. Some people don't like his speed, but I think that's something you can work on. Yeah. He seems like a guy that would really put his all into it. And the one thing I'm excited for is like he's an athletic beast like Josh, and then I have a huge upside. And his character is phenomenal. Like very humble guy, hilarious. The Macy's sweater, coat, and then walking the Wegmans cookies. And like we said, he's a good guy. And the last part I was going to say, like, this is like what we were hoping for. Like I said in our last podcast, I have nothing but love for Diggs. I think he was essential in Josh's growth. But it's at the point now where Josh is at the height of his abilities. He's got this receiver that could potentially be his number one for the next 4 years on a rookie deal.
Yeah.
Potentially. So, yeah, I really love the pick, and I love the Bills draft overall. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's the type of draft where they didn't want to, go after people that, may have not been a culture fit or anything like that. Every bit of Keon Coleman content has been awesome, from like them putting out, the stuff you talked about to the combine interview where he talks about, not doing much outside of home except for golfing, and saying he's Tiger, what was it? Wish I could. He's Tiger, wish I could, not Tiger Woods. That's what it was, yeah. And, I think physical freak, like you said, and the 4.6 40, not the best. Jerry Rice didn't run a fast 40. All I know is he was fast enough to get open, and Keon Coleman said no one's caught him from behind, which there's not much on tape that shows him being caught from behind. He ran the gauntlet catching drill at the combine faster than any receiver, and, was catching every pass. So that's huge. Played, 2 sports. He was even good enough to play for Tom Izzo's Michigan State basketball team, for a little bit. So, and I think, they're going to try at least for a year, try the pivot to more of a run game, throw the ball short for yak yards to, the receivers outside of it, but also the tight ends and the backs, and, have a balanced attack, pivot to, what Kansas City has done post Tyreek Hill. Now, again, Kansas City's, the standard, and it's tough to match that. But I think it's easier to do than trying to, load up on offensive skill people, because those guys are expensive. They're hard to keep around. There's maintenance in terms of, how much you get them the ball. And, when you play in a decent amount of cold weather games, and, people say, oh, it's not every game, but, it's, 2 or 3 games decide if and where you go in the playoff hunt. So, being able to pivot to more of a run game is great. Cole Bishop at safety from Utah, if he can be anything close to what they've had in Hyde and Boyer. And again, Hyde and Boyer were not heralded players when they were brought into Buffalo. And, Sean McDermott got them to play at a really high level, and credit to those guys as well for playing at that level. But, you have to have a decent amount of confidence in the coaching staff. Dwayne Carter was a 4-time captain at Duke, very productive player. Ray Davis, one of the best stories in the entire draft, homeless at 12, didn't start school at 16 because, had both parents in prison, and, was highly productive at 3 schools in college, Temple, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky. And he's great in 2 areas you need to be: pass protection and catching the ball. If you can do those things as a young running back, you'll get on the field no matter what. So he can be a great complement to Cook, hopefully. They get an extra 4 next year with one of the 5ths they traded to Chicago. Drafted a couple tackles late, one from England, Patrick Claybon, I believe. So trying to see if they can unearth a player the way that the Eagles did with Jordan Mailata, with a superb, 300-plus pound athlete. And then I'm trying to remember their other picks, and they're just...
There's actually 3 linemen. The first 5th round pick was our
Cedric Van Pranger, and
that's an awesome name, by the way. The other one was our 6th rounder, Tylen Gravel, and And then the other pick, 6th round, was Daquan Hardy.
Daquan Hardy, another corner,
Stephen Solomon, phenomenal edge.
he led the country in sacks too. So
Oh my God! It's
yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6.
And then Idafu and Alufashow, sorry, at linebacker, and that was a guy. The bootleg football guys loved that guy. He was one of their top backers, and getting him in the 5th round is great.
Yeah, the Bills used 10 picks this year, and then what I really love about this draft is I was wondering if it felt like they were going to use ammunition, but Bean did the really smart thing. He's bolstering his, the roster, a lot of young talent, and by doing that, we have $50 million in cap space next year. I mean, they have a ton of picks as well. So very good. I think you have the talent here to at least. I think we can still. Again, you have Josh Allen as a quarterback.
Yeah.
And then just really love this draft. And then lastly, what are your thoughts? We got a running back as a undrafted free agent, and happens to be the son of Frank Gore.
Yeah. That's funny. Frank Gore's senior played with Josh Allen, and then how many years later? Like 4 years later, 4 or 5 years later, he's playing with his son. I mean, we'll see if he makes the roster, but he's one of the big name undrafted guys that was brought in. They haven't been able to. Yep. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just from what I've seen of him, I think they are getting him to be the third down back kind of.
Yeah. I could see that maybe. It's just it's tough to fit all those guys on a roster when it comes down to 53, but it'll be an interesting story for sure. There was a couple of people they brought in today, and then other teams that brought in receiver. Chase Claypool, he was, one of my guys in Notre Dame, and then he was one of your guys for the Steelers year one. And, it didn't pan out, but they were able to trade him to Chicago and eventually turn that into Joey Porter Jr., and he's fallen off. Trying to think of the other receiver moves this week. Titans getting Tyler Boyd, the Brian Callen connection from Cincinnati.
OBJ to the Dolphins.
OBJ to the Dolphins, yep. Behind Tyreek and Jalen.
People were mad about it. It's like, they had more money for us.
Yeah.
And it took me an hour to digest the Claypool thing. I think at best, because again, he did have a great year last year, so I'm sure he didn't sign to that big of a deal.
No, yeah.
And at worst, you can cut him, and he'll either be a training camp cut or he'll start on the team. I can see him maybe being the third receiver potentially. And again, I know he has not lived up to his expectations, especially last year. It kind of seemed like there's some plays looking at the Bears he didn't really put his full effort in. But and again, it just happens in people's careers. He could be a good third receiver, And then you have Samuel, who I think is going to have a lot bigger of a role.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned his best year was with Joe Brady. All those years back on the Panthers. And he had, at best, a decent quarterback. He's not had a player like a Josh Allen's caliber.
Yeah, and then
we got our boy Coleman, who, with the abilities, I'm not going to say he's going to be as good as Jamar Chase, but, I wouldn't be surprised if he just has that natural talent making those big plays and stuff like that. So, it's going to be a very, very exciting season.
Yep. And he's reached out to Andre Reed, and then the one last, I think he's pulling all the right levers and making all the right moves. And then the last receiver move I'll bring up is DJ Chark to the Chargers.
Okay, that was a smart thing.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, yeah. And I was going to say, the only sad thing about this time of the year is after the draft, there's a couple things here and there, but for the most part, it kind of gets dead till the late June-ish. Yeah,
although June 1st, all the post-June 1st cuts, that's, some money comes in. Some will come in for the Bills because of Trey White, some for the Raiders because of Jimmy G. So maybe those teams are more able to make certain moves. I think, Bills, maybe they make a move at receiver, another corner. Michael Thomas, maybe? Michael Thomas? I don't know.
I was thinking that too. Yeah, maybe. Like, this is a third receiver. Obviously he's nowhere near as good as when he was in his prime. But,
yeah,
it could be very, very interesting. But we could potentially be getting our schedule.
Next week. Yep, next week. I think they said it's Thursday. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it is official now?
I don't know if it's official yet. I think there's a couple of sources that have come out and said that, and Rich Eisen said open up. He was told, keep your Thursday open. So, although NFL Network, I just read today, there's something about them not having NFL Total Access and reducing original content, and it's like, what's going on with this stuff that was so awesome for so many years? Now they're doing cutbacks here and there across the media landscape, not just there, TNT, NBA, but
yeah, it's a ever-changing market.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of things to look forward to for this upcoming year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's fun off season. Schedule release days, we know who people are playing. It's just the when that makes everything so interesting. I want to see CJ Stroud, Micah Parsons, because they've been talking all off season. Not sure if you've seen any of those videos.
No, I haven't. I bet they're good.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, so, very fun episode, guys. Again, I'm just salivating at getting the schedule finally.
Yeah.
Plan out your fall and winter in advance. But, some exciting stuff to come. But, it was fun talking as always. This is Andy.
And this is Robin.